since I wasn't here.
Item number 3, discussion and public hearing on the Farragut Capital Improvement Plan. And Gary Palmer, the Associate Town Administrator, is going to go through this with us.
I'm going to bore you to death with PowerPoint. Evening. Before you tonight, we have the 2012-2016 Capital Investment Plan or program, depending on what document you read. And before you, in your packet, should be a printout. I did another printout tonight. It has no material changes in it, but if you want a copy, I have it. I didn't want to flood you with a bunch of paperwork. Also at your seats is a breakdown of each individual project, which kind of gives a little bit of background and indicates how the funds are going to be allocated with each individual project. A little bit of history on this year's CIP is different from prior years. Is the board has had 2 workshops on it. We presented every project and came up with formulas for each individual project, which we feel is going to fit with our fiscal situation this year. So what you'll do is you'll see some differences from last year's approved and adopted CIP from this year. So you'll see some projects that were in there from last year that have zeros this year. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're done. That just means that we're not going to propose to fund them for this year. And I also, in the packet, I kind of went through a little, in the memo, some brief to give you the statutory authority for the Planning Commission, because I think it's always good for everybody to know what the process is, myself included, because it's easy to forget. This body is charged with overseeing the development of the community, both public and private developments. So with that, our ordinance requires a recommendation from this body to the board before the CIP can be approved. So tonight, I'm going to go through each individual project, and if you have questions about the project, feel free to stop me, or if you want to wait till the end, both Daryl and Sue are here to talk about the individual projects. All the projects are either one department or the other. I can kind of give you some numbers, but really I put this together. They're the ones that are that really did all the grunt work on this. I just got tasked with presenting it. So if there are no preliminary questions, I'll move on. A little bit of the methodology with this year. Early on, we looked at, of course, like with anything going on with the town, we're going to look at our expenditures. We're going to look at our revenues. We're going to look at the projections, and we're going to look at trends to see how things are going to pan out. That basically will dictate what we can and can't do as a community, as a town. And then we will also look at a newer document that we have that should be published here shortly, which is the strategic plan for the town. During that process, we had visioning sessions both with the board, planning commission, and the community, and we developed the goals and objectives of that plan. And each individual project that's on this year's list is a result of either those strategic visioning sessions, or we're already contracted or encumbered in some way. The only one, if you look at that last bullet, and I put that in there, is and I believe, and I'm not absolutely sure, that with the exception of the Grigsby Chapel Island improvements, everything else is from the strategic plan as year 1 priorities. And I can explain a little bit more of that later. I think, but for obvious reasons, we need to take a look at what's going on out there and do some work. It's important for the Planning Commission to have this list, because what we're looking for is a recommendation from this body to approve this list, not necessarily the funding, but the project itself. So at the end of this is going to be my recommendation, is the approval of this list here. This has a list of every project that we're going to propose for 2012. It's subject to change if we don't encumber funds in the next year, and the CIP is a little bit different from the year-to-year budget. It's dynamic. It can change, and it usually does change from year to year. So I'll go through the individual projects and kind of highlight some of the things with these projects. and everybody should be fairly familiar with most of them. Watt Road extension, Old Stage Road improvements. Indicated on the last slide is I put in red text the ones that we have that we're obligated to do at this point. We have a cost share with TDOT, and they are leading the project, so they're going to be doing everything. I'd like to say it's well underway, but it's underway, and we're requesting $8,880 for this year's CIP for that project. Gives you a little bit more of a breakdown towards the bottom with projected costs and the complete total cost to the town, which is 20%, $793,360. We have the Campbell Station Road widening project, which, as everybody knows, was closed out earlier in I think it was November 2010. And we always have residual invoices that come in. As stuff is closed out, as books are closed, audits are done, TDOT will get invoices throughout the year. Of course, they're not going to miss an opportunity to pass some of that cost on to us through their own invoices, so we need to budget some funds to cover that cost. $50,000 for 2012 should cover whatever comes in. Campbell Station Road corridor decorative lighting. I don't know if there was any discussion at all through this body, but the board has discussed this and and also in the strategic planning process, we discussed this, of having decorative lighting along the corridor in Campbell Station Road to kind of give that corridor feel with the different decorative style of poles, and that would, of course, mean a change in the infrastructure and removal of the old infrastructure, and it's a considerable cost at $550,000, and that's what we're requesting to be budgeted for 2012. A lot of research has to be done on this project, so I'll put that caveat out there. We do have a lot of utilities that run through that area, so it's going to be a kind of a logistical juggling act with that.
You want to take a question? You're talking about removal of the old poles. You talking about the new old poles, or
wooden poles that are out there? I don't know the inventory of what's out there, if there's new ones that are actually have been put in there, but there are some wooden ones that we would remove and replace with whatever material, aluminum or steel that's.
Talking about any of the poles that have just been recently installed by
Not
the two
ones.
improvement projects.
The ones that are, are not at a 90-degree angle and
Yeah.
warped, and those.
So it's for safety reasons.
No, this is purely decorative.
I didn't know if the wooden pole's going to fall, or we're just making it look pretty.
I don't think there's any pole out there that's in danger of falling. It's just, it's a beautification project.
Who selects these poles?
That would probably go through the engineering department and administration, and then to the board, depending on the cost, of course. I think we all can kind of get an idea if we think of a city that's got some of these decorative fixtures. I think one of the ones that we looked at, of course, David being from the Memphis area, was a Beale Street type fixture. Something like that, really.
Gonna look old-timey,
Right.
whatever that is.
But you're going to leave the new poles for the two improvement projects in, which are the aluminum poles, right?
Yes, sir. I would imagine, I can't answer completely. I would imagine that we would not take something that's brand new out just for
Well,
decorative
that's my point, because it
purposes.
just says poles, and I don't know which ones you're talking about. And
Right.
if it's just going to be decoration, or you're talking about going to something, that's, more of the old-timey, as the mayor says, for all of them, or just going to be some of them, then we got a mixture, so.
I would offer that if it was something we could modify and not have to remove, that's definitely the direction I think we would go in. But if it was going to be
Well, I sure wouldn't be,
completely
wanting
different
personally
from,
to support over $500,000 just for looks of a few poles versus all the rest of the poles that we've just put in over the last couple of years.
I
That's just
understand.
my personal.
Say again?
Where did the estimate come from?
If you refer to your packet, there should be that in there.
It's in there, but
Number, but
what's it composed of? What's the
I'm not understanding what you're asking me.
Wants to know
Basis of the estimate.
where'd you come up with the basis for the
Basis of
550?
Oh, we looked at some different polls and out of catalogs and pulled numbers.
So it's, okay, WAG,
I'm sorry?
a WAG.
A WAG.
Yep.
I get your reference, but I don't agree with it. So it's, I mean, we did a little bit more than that. And we don't pull this stuff out of thin air.
Going to cause how much obstruction of the walkways or the road, or how much of that is involved? None, or?
Project, we would have to, do some studying of this and really come back to the table, probably this table or the board table, and offer some recommendations on direction. It's really just too early to say, but, we need to get the funding in place in order to move on it.
Are,
Daryl says 30.
see, Gary, are we, these polls, are we trying to develop a overall theme throughout all of Farragut, or are we just going to have something that's going to end up on Campbell Station? I know we're going to start there, but we're going to try to expand it to Kingston Pike and Grigsby Chapel and...
I think that this would be kind of the pilot project for that. I could see that happening as the funding's available throughout the evolution of the town. I think that you need to definitely add some of these elements to corridors that are key corridors. If I were to pick a downtown point for the town of Farragut, it would be Kingston Pike and Campbell Station. Could be considered, a thoroughfare and a gateway to the town, so I think you would want to focus on those areas. And I think, this is one of those items that as we progress through the comprehensive land use plan will certainly be a part of that discussion.
The idea here is to begin to make ourselves look like a historic town, which we are. And this is all in the strategic plan, which most of you had an opportunity to participate in the deliberations on what would be our strategy for the coming 15 years or so. And this is part of the strategy, and that is to present a look that looks historic, as well as highlighting our assets that are historic. That's what it's all about, and we start here. That doesn't mean we end here. In fact, we would have ambitions to do the same thing throughout the town to the extent that we can afford it.
Back to this one, I'll move on, but anytime you want to come back to it. This is a project I think everybody's familiar with. The
Gary, before we
Farmville
leave
Creek-
Campbell Station, I've got another question.
Sure.
Between the two projects, kind of the follow-up to the road widening, we use what was going to be a pocket park there at the entrance to Farragut High School as a construction laydown area, staging area, and what have you, and then it's been grassed over. I don't see anything in there as far as following up, either in the park or a road, follow-up projects relative to that. What is the status of that in anybody's thinking?
Project that's offered
Did I
on this
not
year's CIP for an outdoor classroom.
Is that where the location of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.